Welcome back. I'm David Rich. Last week we just heard about von Thunen's model, but this week we're back with the latest and greatest model, the least cost theory. Here's Alfred Weber! Thank you so much for being here, Alfred.
Of course.
So Alfred, you're an economic geographer in Germany?
Yeah.
And you just released a book on the theory of where industries are located?
Yeah. Real crowd pleaser out there. It focuses on three key points. Labor, transportation, and agglomeration.
So Alfred, you mentioned transportation. What does that have to do with your model?
Yeah, well, it's all about resources. So if the resources are lightweight, typically the industry can be farther away. But if the resources are heavier, then typically the industry has to locate near the resources to avoid those expensive costs for transporting it, obviously. An example of this is in China. The U.S. industries will outsource their industries out into China, so that way they can afford the cheap resources, which will ultimately allow them to expand more on their cost, because the resources are typically very lightweight.
So, agglomeration was next. Can you explain that for us?
Well, agglomeration is basically whenever industries cluster near an area so that they can share resources, talents, and facilities. So these industries will cluster here to share all those things and also produce their product, and it typically is very efficient. So an example of this is like Silicon Valley in California, where all those Apple products and the new technological advances are coming out.
Your last point was labor. Explain how that applies to your model.
Well, originally, transportation was the most important part of my model, but now I've realized that labor is actually more important because, well, if you think about it, think of Nike. They outsource their industries to LDCs like Indonesia, where they can be built for cheaper costs, which lowers their labor cost, but it also, in turn, it builds this beautiful cycle of, it builds that LDC, it gives them industrialization, globalization, infrastructure, and it builds a stable economy. And so by using that cheap labor and benefiting them too, we're able to create this harmonious effect where we get the cheap labor, which we can use that money that was originally used for labor to expand on something else that might be more expensive, like the transportation of those resources, and yet these countries also get infrastructure, economy, and stuff like that.
And other economic geographers, what do they think of your theory?
Well, some aren't really a fan, but the reason for that is because there's this new principle that came out. They call it the substitution principle, which basically states that an industry can locate wherever it needs to, and just as long as the prices for those 3 points don't go up at the same time. But if they do go up, then that principle kind of is out of place. So I'd like to say that yes, that principle could possibly avoid my theory, but at the same time it's very experimental and you're not really sure how it could go because it just it has that if you will. Whereas my theory is very concise and it'll tell you, if you lower this cost, then you can take that money and expand on other things. So I believe that my theory can be avoided by this, but it's very experimental and very unknown.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was nice talking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Alright, that's Alfred Weber, everyone. Good night. You're an economic geographer? What exactly is that?
Well, we study economics geographically.